2020 will be a year to remember for many reasons, and politics was right smack in the middle of most of it. Jim Farney is the Regina Director for the Johnson-Shoyama School of Public Policy. He joins me now for a look back. Jim, we've talked a few times this year and thought we'd get you to pick 3 stories to kind of sum up politics in Saskatchewan in 2020. And I'd like to start with the obvious one, the pandemic, and how did that affect the provincial budget?
So everything's COVID, right? It's 2020. It affected it in 2 ways, I think, both in how it was delivered. So, Sam, you and I had a perfectly normal budget day planned late in March, and that got scrambled. And so we kind of had this expenditure thing, and then we had a budget, and then we had a big fiscal update. And all of that kind of carry forward or bringing out of financial information came out with a lot of uncertainty about spending, about revenue, about the economy, and that's going to continue regardless. 2021, let's hope we're back to normal, but the government projections don't have us back to normal until 2022 or 2023. So that, I think, was a really big story in the year.
Tristan Deroser's ceremonial fast on the lawn outside the legislature also got a lot of attention in politics this year. What do you think about how the government handled that?
The reason that story makes my list is if you look globally, think of Black Lives Matter in the States or many large Canadian cities, much of 2020, once we dig deeper under the pandemic, is stories of people who don't have access to power, organizing and mobilizing. And we didn't see as much of that in Saskatchewan as you saw in other places in North America. But Tristan's story, both his march, the kind of signaling of the suicide mental health addictions crisis, the question about whether the North and Indigenous populations are well served by the government, and then the story that comes after, whether or not Justice Graham Mitchell was right to go to the ceremony at the end of his protest, and the complaint that's been made to the Judicial Review Commission about his behavior around it. All of those open up big questions about how well our political system hears those voices on the outside and how well the provincial government's able to respond to those needs.
And the third story, something we haven't seen in the headlines in a little while, but certainly came up earlier this year and also in the provincial election, Western alienation. Is that here to stay?
I think it is for a little while. If we go back a year ago, we would have been looking at the federal election and the Tory sweep of Saskatchewan and Alberta and this rise of Western separatism. We saw in the provincial election the surprising performance of the Buffalo Party, which suggests that the pandemic hasn't driven it away. And I think the conditions that brought it to the fore, the changes in the energy market that's causing a lot of economic dislocation for a lot of people, the fact that Canadian politics nationally is moving towards the left or a more assertive government direction. And I think if we see a spring federal election, we're likely to see more of that. But Saskatchewan and Alberta continuing to be pretty conservative places, there's big tensions there. And we haven't talked about it a lot because COVID's been so very important. But none of the underlying causes of it have gone away, or I'd argue really been addressed. So I do think we'll see that forward in 2021.
Okay, let's look more into 2021. We're just a few hours away. What political stories will you be watching into next year?
So there's that Western alienation bit. More broadly, a lot of people are forecasting a federal election. How our provincial government relates to that federal reality, I think, is really going to be important. There's an appetite for national programs in pharmacare, in long-term care, in child care that's been signaled. And going forward, one of the dynamics is that the feds are going to have a lot of fiscal capacity. They will have the ability to spend money, whereas all the provinces are quite fiscally constrained for a bunch of kind of systematic reasons. How does our provincial government, which has been very strong on Saskatchewan being autonomous and being a fairly conservative, fairly balanced budgeting type of place, react to what the federal government has in store? I think there's going to be, even once we get past the carbon tax, a lot of federal, provincial kind of back and forth over that type of thing.
Jim, thanks so much for your time tonight and this year. Happy New Year.
You too, Sam.